Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. From quarantine to quarantine, more than 300 U.S. citizens have arrived back home after a trip on a virus-infected cruise ship. They now face further containment. The head of a leading hospital at the center of the coronavirus outbreak dies as the virus continues its rampant spread throughout China. Former New York City mayor and billionaire businessman Michael Bloomberg qualifies for the next Democratic presidential debate. And Daytona 500 driver Ryan Newman is in the hospital after a violent crash near the end of yesterday's race. Across the finish line, Hamlin took his third Daytona victory in a photo finish. After a nearly two-week holdup in the waters of Japan, American cruise passengers are now quarantined at U.S. military bases. More than 300 U.S. citizens are the latest to join other evacuees escaping the coronavirus.
For more than 300 Americans, one round of quarantine has finished and another has just begun. Arriving back on U.S. soil by charter plane, taken to U.S. military bases. Another 14 days of containment ahead. The last 13 days spent stuck on a cruise ship affected by the coronavirus while docked in Japan. 338 U.S. cruise ship passengers arrived. They flew home on 2 U.S. jets. On board, 14 people confirmed to be carrying the coronavirus. 7 of those infected flew on each plane in specialized containment areas. But not everyone wanted to come home. State Department officials say another 60 Americans remained in Japan for monitoring. Dr. William Walters, a senior medical official for the State Department, said U.S. officials were not previously informed that some of the group had tested positive for the virus. It was only after the U.S. cruise passengers disembarked and boarded buses that Japanese officials gave the update. The passengers spent about 40 minutes in close proximity during the bus ride. 14 buses transported them from Yokohama port to Tokyo's Haneda Airport. One of the planes landed at Travis Air Force Base in California on Sunday night. The other plane landed a few hours later on Monday morning at Joint Base San Antonio in Texas. Ground crew wearing anti-contamination suits met the passengers as they disembarked. The 14 passengers who had tested positive were taken elsewhere. Officials say they were moved to a separate facility in Omaha, Nebraska. The new evacuees arriving at Travis Air Base will be kept separately from those already in quarantine there. More than 200 Americans that arrived on flights from China are already at the base in a hotel. They arrived earlier in February. Officials said no Travis airmen will have contact with the passengers. Previously, more than 40 Americans on the Diamond Princess cruise ship had tested positive. U.S. health officials said they would remain in Japan for treatment. The cruise ship is the epicenter of virus infections outside China, with about half of all known cases in the rest of the world being found aboard.
A further 200 U.S. citizens are stuck in Cambodia. This due to a case of the virus on another cruise ship, the Westerdam. Among them, 92 are still on board and others are in hotels. Those who have already returned home will be contacted by local health authorities. And in related news, the Diamond Princess cruise ship, docked in Japanese waters, ends its coronavirus quarantine tomorrow. Governments are planning the evacuations. Meanwhile, Japan says it may be able to treat the coronavirus with HIV medication.
Japan plans to trial HIV medications to treat patients infected with coronavirus as the number of cases in the country keep on growing. 88 more people aboard the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan have tested positive. The ship is near the end of its 2-week quarantine. Those aboard can begin to disembark Wednesday as long as they test negative for the virus. Those testing positive will go to the hospital. Some 3,700 passengers and crew remain in confinement on the Diamond Princess. So far, there are over 600 confirmed cases of coronavirus in Japan, with 540 of them from the ship. Japan's government said clinical trials using HIV medication on the virus can start as soon as possible. He would not say how long it could take. Canada, Australia, Italy, and South Korea are now also planning evacuations for their citizens on the cruise liner. A South Korean presidential jet departed on Tuesday to pick up 5 of its citizens. 14 South Koreans were aboard the Diamond Princess, passengers and crew. None tested positive for the virus. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced it will evacuate more than 200 of its citizens from Japan on Wednesday. Those returning will have 14 more days in quarantine in Darwin.
It's frustrating and it's unfortunate, but it is absolutely necessary to ensure that we put the measures in place that have been so effective in containing the spread of this virus and ensuring that Australians here can go about their lives on.
He said they would also bring back New Zealand passengers who would be transferred on from Darwin. Britain and Taiwan are also planning evacuations for their citizens, but details are not yet decided. Both have passengers infected with the virus.
Democratic presidential hopefuls have just a few more days to make their final pitches to voters in Nevada. Early voting is already underway there ahead of the state's caucuses on Saturday.
With your help, we're going to win here in Nevada.
The fight is on for Nevada.
It is so wonderful to be out of the snow and in this beautiful sunny state of Nevada.
The first 2020 Democratic contest in the West.
I know that people in Nevada are taking your responsibility, your influence, your power, that thumb on the scale that you have, so seriously.
5 days before the state's caucuses, early voting is already underway, in the most diverse test yet for the Democratic field. Front and center is a familiar debate over health care, but with a new twist. The state's powerful culinary workers union strongly opposes Medicare for all, saying abolishing private insurance would take away their hard-fought health insurance plans. It's one of the biggest challenges facing Bernie Sanders, whose support for Medicare for all is at the heart of his candidacy. His rivals are trying to capitalize on the divide, hoping to slow his surge.
No one should be able to tell them they can no longer have that plan. And I'll be damned if we're going to erase the union's efforts.
Joe Biden is trying to revive his campaign in Nevada after lackluster showings in Iowa and New Hampshire. One candidate not competing here is still hanging over the race, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. His Democratic rivals are piling on the self-funded billionaire.
Mr. Bloomberg, like anybody else, has a right to run for president. He does not have a right to buy the presidency.
State Democratic Party officials say there were more than 18,000 early voters on Saturday alone. The party is hoping to avoid the caucus fiasco that happened in Iowa. And in related news, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg received sufficient support in polls to qualify for the next Democratic presidential debate. He will face at least 5 other Democratic presidential hopefuls looking to tear into his past history.
When I first took office,
Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg qualified for the next Democratic presidential debate. Bloomberg will be joined on stage in Nevada by at least 5 other candidates. It will be the 9th debate held by Democratic presidential hopefuls. Bloomberg entered the race late, missing the first 4 nominating contests. He hopes to start getting support by March 3rd, when 14 states vote for a nominee. The other candidates accuse Bloomberg of trying to use his billions to buy the nomination. Bloomberg responds that he plays by the rules and has offered to fund the Democratic effort, even if he doesn't win the nomination. He will likely be grilled about his support of discriminatory policing strategies while mayor of New York. Other candidates are also bringing up sexual harassment and discrimination cases tied to Bloomberg and his company, Bloomberg LP. Those who have settled cases with the company are not legally permitted to talk about what they experienced. His campaign says any large company is going to have cases like those.
In Brussels today, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi urges U.S. allies not to choose Huawei to build their 5G infrastructure. The UK has recently allowed the Chinese telecom firm to build part of its 5G network. President Trump hung up on British Prime Minister Boris Johnson last month when he heard Johnson's decision.
On Monday in Belgium, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi pressuring U.S. allies not to use Huawei's 5G infrastructure. Last week, the Department of Justice charged the Chinese telecom giant with conspiracy to steal trade secrets from U.S. counterparts.
It's a People's Liberation Army developed initiative using reverse engineering from Western technology. So, of course, it's going to be cheaper to put on the market. And if it's cheaper, they get the market share, and then they bring in their autocracy of lack of privacy in other entities.
The UK decided to allow Huawei to build part of its 5G cellular infrastructure, despite the Trump administration calling on them to boycott the Chinese company.
Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump probably not going to have many dinners together. But if you ask them about British purchase of Huawei, they'll give you the same answer.
Washington identified Huawei as a national security threat last November. In January, Rep. Jim Banks from Indiana introduced a bill that would stop the U.S. from sharing intelligence with countries that use Huawei's 5G networks. Banks called Huawei a Trojan horse for the Chinese Communist Party, used to spy on and infiltrate other nations.
For the benefit of a few corporations, you cannot sell the privacy of the people of your country down the river. As I said before, it's like having the state police, the Chinese state police, right in your pocket.
Pelosi says the Chinese regime economically threatens companies, saying if they don't use Huawei, the regime won't make deals with them.
And media reports say the U.S. could be considering changing its regulations to allow it to block shipments of chips to Huawei Technologies. And in other news, Jackson, Mississippi is now partially submerged. As many as 1,000 homes have flooded so far, but no injuries have been reported.
On Monday, Mississippi's Pearl River reached 36.8 feet, the third highest level ever recorded. According to the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency, almost 2,400 structures closest to the river could take on weight or get surrounded by flooding. 11 counties reported damage to the state emergency management officials after severe weather hit the state last Monday. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves said at a news conference yesterday the city doesn't anticipate the situation ending anytime soon. According to AccuWeather, minor to moderate flooding was also common along some larger rivers in the Carolinas, Louisiana, western Alabama, and southern Arkansas. He predicts the storm is set to move northeast by Thursday.
Another storm system is forming along the central Gulf Coast near the stalled boundary. The next round of rain will ramp up across eastern Texas and Louisiana later tomorrow into the night. And in other news, the Boy Scouts of America is filing for bankruptcy. The organization says it is overwhelmed with mounting legal costs from hundreds of lawsuits. The organization has faced repeated allegations about the sexual abuse of boys. It listed liabilities of between $100 million and $500 million, but only $50,000 or less in assets. As a result of the filing, all civil litigation against the organization is suspended. And a peach farmer in Missouri has won his lawsuit against herbicide providers Bayer and BASF to the sum of $265 million. This raises the stakes for the two companies, facing at least 140 similar cases in U.S. courts later this year.
A jury in U.S. District Court in Missouri handed the state's largest peach farmer $15 million in actual and $250 million in punitive damages. Peach farmer Bill Bader sued the companies Bayer and BASF. He said his 1,000-acre orchard was irreparably harmed by herbicide that they produce, which drifted onto his trees from nearby farms. This was the first case in the U.S. to rule on the use of dicamba-based herbicides causing damage to cropland. It is alleged the herbicide has affected tens of thousands of acres across the United States. Farmers claim the herbicide can become a vapor and drift for miles when used in certain weather. Bayer said it was disappointed with the jury's verdict and plans to appeal. BASF also said it was surprised and disappointed by the decision and plans to appeal.
And an update on Wikileaks founder Julian Assange. The organization's editor-in-chief spoke with media about Assange's health and his solitary confinement ahead of his extradition hearing in London next week.
Wikileaks founder Julian Assange is no longer being held in solitary confinement and his health is improving. That was the revelation from the editor of Wikileaks on Tuesday, ahead of a hearing in London next week over an extradition request from the United States, where Assange is wanted on spying charges.
I saw him about 10 days ago. He has improved, and thanks to the pressure from his legal team, mostly behind the scenes, from the general public.
Assange first made global headlines a decade ago, when Wikileaks published a classified US military video showing an attack in Baghdad that killed 12 people. The 48-year-old faces 18 charges in the US, including conspiring to hack government computers and violating espionage law. He fled to the Ecuadorian embassy in London in 2012 to avoid extradition to Sweden, where he was wanted for questioning about allegations of sex crimes, which have since been dropped. After 7 years holed up in the embassy, he was dragged out in May last year and jailed for skipping bail before the US launched its extradition request. The first half of his extradition hearing gets underway next week and will resume in May.
Coming up, Chinese authorities order citizens back to work in order to keep the economy going. But the coronavirus is not under control. More on the effects when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
The coronavirus outbreak is getting more severe. The head of a leading hospital in China's central city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, died of the disease today.
The head of a leading hospital in Wuhan has died of the coronavirus. Chinese state television reported that Liu Zhiming, the director of a hospital designated to treat virus-infected patients, died on Tuesday. The virus remains far from contained, despite China's lockdown of cities and tough curbs on travel, at great cost to the economy and global business. Singapore Airlines said it would temporarily cut flights across its network in the 3 months to May, as the epidemic hits demand for services in the Asian city-state, as well as through the key transit hub. The European Union Chamber of Commerce in China said the world's pharmacies may face a shortage of antibiotics and other drugs if the outbreak cannot be resolved soon, and accused Beijing of making supply chain problems worse.
After an extended Lunar New Year holiday, China is now getting back to work under the orders of authorities. Experts say it's a risky move. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
China is facing a new dilemma. To sustain the economy, authorities ordered companies to resume operation. Today, most of Beijing's workforce returned to their jobs. But an expert says it's a risky move. In an interview with the Epoch Times Chinese edition, economist Wu Xiaolong says China needs to reduce public activities where people gather. He advised that activities can resume after the peak of the outbreak and when a vaccine is developed. Chinese officials estimate 160 million people will go back to work by Tuesday. Wu says with many cities under lockdown and public transportation shut down, product delivery has become a problem. But he explained that crowds of workers inside factories could lead to large-scale group infections. Chinese media have already reported several cases. Last weekend, after a staff member at Guangzhou was confirmed with the coronavirus infection, the entire company staff were put under quarantine. Likewise, another company in Chongqing confirmed 2 cases of the infection. One of the patients was asymptomatic and had close contacts with 131 people. The entire company was locked down and is now under quarantine. Many businesses in China have also suffered financially. Restaurant group Shibei brought in $8 million in revenue in 2018, but even it says if the disease isn't contained, it won't last more than 3 months with the cash it has on hand. Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, Apple cuts sales expectations after the coronavirus outbreak affects the company's Chinese factories. Find out what company stands to benefit after the break.
It was special for us. Bring your family, let your children experience this.
I know my daughter just loves it. When the curtain first opened, I looked out at her face and she was amazed by what she saw.
It's great for the whole family.
And I have a granddaughter. I want her to see something like this because it'll probably enrich her soul and her development as a person. It would change her life.
It's hard for kids to listen to parents all the time, but when they hear it from an outside influence as well, reinforcing your values, that's great.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And her birthday was Friday, so we surprised her with tickets.
I was just so amazed. They're amazing, amazing dancers.
The girls are so elegant and beautiful, and the colors are amazing.
It's just amazing. It's truly breathtaking. Just the story. There's a story behind everything as well, which is amazing. There's so much culture.
It's a bridge between meditation and peace and where we are now in our busy lives.
As an adult and a teacher, it's awesome to see kids reacting and having that positive reaction to the show.
I will see it next year and year after that and the year after that. It is just incredible, absolutely beautiful.
I wish I could see it again, like right now.
The coronavirus has affected both sales and production for Apple. The company says it will not meet next month's earnings predictions.
Apple became the biggest company to flag damage to its business from the coronavirus on Monday. It warned of an assault on two fronts. Supply is a problem with factories in China still slow to reopen, and it sees sales of its devices falling off too. Many of its stores in China are still closed or have limited hours. Now Apple is cutting expectations for sales for this quarter. A month ago, as the virus began to take hold, Apple thought sales would stay relatively robust, some $63 to $67 billion. On Monday, it didn't offer up a new estimate to account for the virus's impact. With lost production and weakening demand in China from the virus outbreak, that means it all adds up to fewer iPhones for sale around the world. Apple's stock is expected to face a knee-jerk reaction on Tuesday. Analysts say the virus may slash demand for smartphones by half in the first quarter in China, the world's biggest market for the devices. Meanwhile, rival Samsung stands to reap the rewards of a decade-long bet on making their low-cost smartphones in Vietnam.
HSBC said today it was making major changes. It will shed $100 billion in assets, shrink its investment bank, and revamp its U.S. and European businesses.
Major changes in store for HSBC. The London-based bank announcing it plans to trim costs and rearrange its business worldwide. This coming after it reported a 33% loss of profit last year. Interim CEO Noel Quinn released a statement saying parts of the business are not delivering acceptable results. HSBC has been hit hard with falling interest rates, Hong Kong protests, and the coronavirus outbreak in China. The bank plans to close a third of its U.S. branches. It will also shrink its European operation and shift resources to Asia.
France's Alstom is buying the rail division of Canada's Bombardier for up to $6.7 billion. The aim is to create the world's second-largest train manufacturer. It could also compete with China's massive state-owned rail manufacturing industry.
The cash and shares deal was announced on Monday. It's the latest attempt by Western rail firms to try to build scale. Alstom is a maker of TGV bullet trains that speed between French cities such as Paris and Nice. European regulators blocked the company from merging with Germany's Siemens last year. They argued the deal could penalize consumers. The agreement between Alstom and Bombardier would unite the companies with an estimated $17 billion in combined revenues. A combination with Bombardier would give Alstom a share of between 40% and 60% of the European regional train market. The French government welcomed the transaction. Bombardier and Alstom said they expected the deal to close in the first half of 2021. However, the acquisition must now be approved by the EU competition regulators.
Coming up, two great athletes tie for World Sportsman of the Year for the first time in the awards history. Find out which world-class athletes were in attendance after the break.
extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have walked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次舉起黑旗和橙旗呢，去發射了很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放催淚彈嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂啦，我就。記者唔該晒人好嘛，唔該晒。That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.
And a grim reminder at the Daytona 500 yesterday. Fans held their breath on the final lap as a severe crash put driver Ryan Newman in the hospital. The beloved yet highly dangerous sport has stretched nearly 2 decades without a fatality.
A terrifying end to the Daytona 500. Driver Ryan Newman flipped across the finish line after surging into the lead on the final lap of the race. Ryan Blaney's bumper caught the back of Newman's number 6 Ford, sending him into the wall. His car flipped, rolled, was hit on the driver's side by another car, and finally skidded across the finish line in flames. Crews hurried to the rescue. A waiting ambulance took the 2008 winner directly to the hospital. NASCAR later announced Newman is in serious condition, but his injuries are not life-threatening. President Trump also expressed his concern on Twitter. At the finish line, Denny Hamlin made history with a second straight victory in a photo finish over Blaney, but his celebration was quickly muted. NASCAR scrapped the traditional victory lane party. Drivers, fans, and officials were rocked by Newman's accident. It came 19 years after Dale Earnhardt was killed on the last lap of the Daytona 500 in 2001. Hamlin's victory came after just the second rain postponement in 62 years and a visit from the president.
Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton and Barcelona captain Lionel Messi were named joint winners of the World Sportsman of the Year award, with the voting tied for the first time in the award's 20-year history.
Mercedes driver Hamilton won his 6th World Championship in 2019, while Messi was crowned the world's best player for a record 6th time when he won the Ballon d'Or.
Wow, this is such an incredible honor to see all those greats that I've followed, have been inspired by, to be in amongst, to sit with all of you tonight.
Primero que nada quería agradecer al grupo de la Academia por haberme entregado este reconocimiento. La verdad que es un premio muy importante, muy especial, el cual
American gymnast Simone Biles, who became the most decorated gymnast in World Championship history when she won her 25th medal last year, won her 3rd Sportswoman of the Year.
Yes, it means the world to me. This is my 3rd Laureus award, so I'm truly grateful, and I want to congratulate all the other nominees.
German NBA star Dirk Nowitzki, who retired last year after a 21-year career in the NBA, was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to basketball.
This is a huge honor, thanks to Laureus, thanks to the Academy. A lot of you guys are in the room, inspired me, of course, to be great.
German Formula 3 driver Sophia Flörsch made the Comeback of the Year award. She fractured her spine in an aerial crash in November 2018 and got back into the cockpit last year.
And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.